Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, and I promise you this time, I'm actually going to work on the 51. It's been, God, when did we blow it up? Like 2 months ago? It's been sitting here torn down like this for at least a month, and I'll be honest, it's summertime. The Turbo Ford with that Hemi, thing's running flawlessly, so I'd rather be driving that or spending time out on the boat. I have not had much motivation to work on this thing. You know, when it's 85 degrees, I don't really want to put an engine together, but we're going to put it together. We're going to go do test burnouts, and we're getting this thing back on the road. I promise you that. So I'm sure you guys saw, you know, we melted the motor down in this thing. If not, go look at that video because the carnage was insane. I have no idea how it was still running. Literal giant holes in pistons. So we got to put a new engine together. So what I've got here, this is a 5.9 Magnum. It's out of like a 94 to 96 Ram. I don't really know. I bought it off Facebook. Not in the truck, but judging by the intake, it's an early Magnum motor because it had EGR and everything on it. So this thing has 174,000 miles on it, and it is bone stock. I stripped it down to this, cleaned the deck surfaces up, and just kind of cleaned the whole motor up. So I have not touched the short block on this thing. All I did was tear it down. So what we have to do is, I do have a comp cam I got to put in. That's out of the other one, and these are factory roller motors, so it's a roller cam. Not going to touch the ring gaps. I know everybody said to. I just don't think it's necessary, because that's not what killed the last motor. I mean, I'm sure at some point I'll probably break it because of ring gaps, but I want to find where that is. So this bottom end is staying stock. Stock rod bolts, stock main bolts, everything. We're not even going to open it up. So like I said, we'll put the cam in, and then over here, these are actually the original heads off the truck, or from the original 5.9 I had in there, because the other ones had aluminum melted to the valves and actually had a bent valve in there too. So I got these things cleaned up pretty good. I have my Hughes Performance valve springs in that go with the cam that we're putting in. So I got all the valve springs swapped over on the heads. So we're going to do that. And then I've also got Cometic MLS gaskets to put on, because they're the only ones I found that actually hold boost. And then ARP head studs to put in. And then new timing set and everything. Got to put the Dakota oil pan on it, because that's what it takes to run in this thing. Because there's really no clearance here with the track bar and the drag link and the peg. I mean, and the axle, it needs that Dakota pan. So I'm going to put this thing all together, and then we'll slap it back in. Alright, now the head studs are in. And for those of you that are worried about bringing them in with an impact, that thing is a hand-tight setting. These things are not any tighter than hand-tight. So the ARP studs are on. Now it's time to put the 40 thousandths thick Cometic gaskets on. And these things are badass. They're the only ones that I haven't blown. Everything else is blown, even with studs. Honestly, the best ones I had were the factory head gaskets. They lasted longer than any of the Felpros I put on afterwards. But nothing compares to these Cometics. So we'll slip these on here. Got everything cleaned up really nice. The block surface is nice and clean. And we can drop these right on. Alright, so I got heads on and torqued. 3 stages like they recommend. All the way up through, went and double checked them. So heads are on. Now before we put any of the valve train in, we got to put the new cam in, which means we have to pull the cam plate on the front and pull this lifter spider up here. So we can do that. So we got to get the lifters out of the way. Alright, there's the old cam. Oh, looks good. Cam bearings look good. So that's good news. The more I tear into this motor, it seems like it's pretty solid, but... Alright. This thing's garbage now. Okay, so what I've got here, this is the cam out of the last motor that I'd put in. It's the off-the-shelf comp cam that I'd bought. It's the biggest one they had in stock, because, you know, COVID and everything. 20-746-9. So, it's a pretty small cam, really. It's like a 218, 220. Don't quote me on that. But it's bigger than the stock one, and it definitely moved the power band up. So you can see this thing still looks brand spanking new. So I'll oil this thing up. We'll stick it in there and we put the valve train back together. And this thing will run a lot nicer with this cam. Motor's ready to drop in. Engine mounts are on, timing covers on, water pumps on, pulleys on. I even went and marked 50 degrees before top dead center because we'll need that for the distributor. So that's done. I put the clutch and bell housing back on. I cleaned the flywheel up a little bit and just put the clutch back in as is. I don't know if that's the best option, but it's kind of the only option I got right now. I really don't want to step up to a heavier clutch, so we'll see what this Stage 3 Plus does for me. Maybe when it's running better, it'll do a little bit better. Motor is back in. That's the hard part, getting everything lined up and bolted in. But that's done. Now I just got to start putting everything back on it and kind of mount it all up. And the first thing I'm going to do is the intake manifold. And I'm running on this thing the stock keggar manifold. And I want to give a tip to all you Magnum guys. Everybody knows this plenum leaks. It basically blows this little gasket out and then it starts sucking oil in. Well, this thing's been running 15, 18 pounds for about a year now. Same intake, I've only sealed it once. It's seen 20 plus pounds. I have 0 leaks on this one. Don't waste your money on those big aluminum plates. This is the factory plate, factory bolts. All you got to do is buy a nice Velcro gasket, clean it up really, really well, and coat both sides of the gasket with a really thin coating of this 3-bond 1184. I had this laying around from an old Yamaha project where I had to seal the cases, and when I put this thing together, I just put a light coating on it. This thing is bone dry inside. This stuff really works. Don't spend your money on one of those big plates. Alright, I got this thing mostly buttoned up right now, so now I got to drop the distributor in. And I'll give you guys, these Magnum guys, a couple tips on the Holley Dual Sync distributor. You got to set the motor to 50 degrees before TDC. So what I do is I add a second mark, because real top dead center is, now you can't see it, basically straight up and down there. So this is 50 degrees before TDC. That's the reference angle that you set this to. So I'm not actually running this distributor cap, I'm running this blank cap. So I have the rotor just sitting on here for reference now. And if you look at the top of this, you can see that it kind of has these 2 ears where the cap bolts down. Well, with this big old keggar intake up here, you don't really have room for it. So, if you drop it in and you put number 1, so say you want to set it like this, and you want to set like number 1, you can't rotate this enough. These ears will hit the intake. So you have to rotate the distributor, and if you were going to run an actual rotor with a cap, you'd have to run it somewhere else. So the way I run it is basically just like this, if this is the front of the motor. So it actually puts, if you were going to put a distributor cap on here, puts number 1 all the way back here. Not a big deal, but because you're centering it up kind of here, you can sweep it without it hitting the intake. It will just barely, you can kind of see, and maybe not, there's like just a little bit of a mark there from where it actually hits. But it's enough that you can rotate it and get it positioned the way Holley wants. And to do that, because of the way they have these flat drives on the bottom of these Chryslers, you'll have to go in and rotate that gear. Big flathead screwdriver works it. But I'm going to drop this thing in, sync it up with where they want it, tighten it down, and then always check your timing afterwards just to make sure it's right. So there's a static timing set function. So drop it in, and then before you do anything, go in, lock the timing, and check it. Put a timing light on. Make sure you didn't screw this up before you blow your motor up. But I'm going to drop this in, and then it's just more buttoning up, and she'll be ready to go. Well, I think she's all buttoned up good enough to try and start. Built new plug wires, new oil lines for the turbo. So that's all good. Obviously there's no water in it because there's no radiator, but before I kind of put the whole front and button it up, I want to fire it up like this. So yeah, let me try it. Let's see what happens. Okay, that sounded horrible. Belt was squeaking like crazy for some reason. And it didn't seem to have any oil pressure. But I did just put oil in it. Let's make sure oil pressure sensor's plugged in, which it is. Well, let's try it again. Probably gonna take some time to fill up, but sounds good. Oh, not the fan. Oh God, that belt sounds horrible. Yeah, so there is a lot of oil on this thing, pretty much everywhere. I didn't clean any of the exhaust out, so it's still full of oil, which is probably why it's kind of smoking from everywhere right now. It's burning all that oil, because this thing it was all coated in oil. So I think she's gonna smoke off for a while, but I gotta figure out what's squealing up here. But that's good enough. We can put it all back together. It seems to run great. Sounds good. Oil pressure's great. Button it up. We're gonna go drive it. And it's been a long time since I've driven this thing. I just want to shake it down and make sure it's okay before we really beat on it. It still builds boost. It still builds boost faster than the Ford. I don't get that. It seems pretty happy so far. This thing is so much more violent than the Ford. I forgot about that. Might have killed the clutch. It's hard to tell though, because it was definitely spinning the tires, because I could feel it walk, but I could smell clutch. That would suck. But I mean, that clutch took a beating, so I knew I was taking a chance putting it back in with this one. It never gets old. Oh man, now I'm ashamed I took so long to put this thing back together. I forgot how good it was. And it looks really cool with the hood off. Everybody that drives by, like thumbs up, waves, like big grins. makes other people's day. And they see it and they're like, that's really cool, man. Like, it's fun to bring joy to other people. It makes me happy to drive this thing. I love that it makes other people happy to see it being driven. Alright, I'm feeling kind of nervous here. It's been a long time since I did a burnout in this thing. So I do second or third? I guess I'll start with third. We'll see what happens. Alright, let's try it.
Hell yeah!
This thing is awesome. I just gave that guy in that old Ford one hell of a show. This thing, let me look at the rear tires. Look at this. Like, this is what should have happened at Cleetus and Cars. And I only stopped that burnout because I was worried I wasn't going to be able to get home on these tires. Because that's all cords. We need new burnout tires. But this thing is a monster. I forgot how good it is. Like, God. Unfortunately, it makes that turbo Hemi seem like a giant turd. This thing rips so much harder. It makes boost faster. It pulls harder. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with the Ford, because that turbo Hemi should make way more power than this. And this thing, I forgot how much of a monster this thing is. Like, you saw it. It lights, it goes, and it just, God. And I feel bad I let this thing sit in the garage blowing up for so long, because it is stupid fun to drive. God, this thing is awesome. But I just looked it over. It's burning off some like residual oil. Because I think we were going down the road, the engine bay didn't get that hot, especially with the hood up. So there's like oil on the frame rails and stuff that it's just kind of burning off. But good oil pressure. It stayed cool. Makes boost like a monster. The clutch held third gear, no problems. It'll be a little bit harder with some fresher tires, but she's good. She's good. Now I just got to not break it before we go to the Rockabilly Ruckus and try to win that burnout competition. And we're going to put it on the circle track again. This thing's going to be all crossed up on the circle track because it has more RPM, which I was running out of RPM in third gear last year. So what it did at the Ruckus last year on that dirt track, it's going to be even better this year. But, oh, I'm so excited it's back.